to be expected when you have a great group of folks. So today we're going to spend the first hour of this meeting going through some presentations. First, we're going to hear from Public Policy Lab. They're going to share on an upcoming ecosystem resource. Then we'll hear from a community of practice member Aidan Barrett from Colorado Peak. And then when the hour is almost up, we're going to give y'all an opportunity to share any announcements, resources, or information that you'd want other folks on this call to know about. And then at the close of our meeting, we're going to split up into topical discussion groups to give you a chance to talk to other members about emerging technologies, shared privacy concerns, and how to prepare for application and platform changes in light of HR1. So next up, I'm going to give it on to Elizabeth, who's going to introduce our next speakers.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Quinny. So it's now my privilege to introduce Brielle Mariucci and Jaime Stock from Public Policy Lab. Brielle is a social designer and researcher at Public Policy Lab with a master's in design for social innovation from SVA. She champions participatory research methods, having worked for the Mayor's Office of Economic Opportunity Service Design Studio and the Vera Institute of Justice, educating community and government on participatory research and human-centered design. Jaime is a design strategist and researcher at Public Policy Lab with a background in financial technology and a master's in science, or MSc, in strategic design and management from Parsons School of Design. She recently served as a fellow with Bloomberg Associates, supporting mayors and their teams across the world. We are so excited, like I said, to have Brielle and Jaime here today. This year, we had the privilege of partnering with Public Policy Lab to conduct original research on beneficiary experiences with digital identity processes in 3 states. This was a need. Research directly with beneficiaries was something we were hearing as a need across the ecosystem consistently, and we are so glad to have had the opportunity to scope and conduct this work with Public Policy Lab. So Brielle and Jaime are going to tell you a lot more about that research today and give you a little bit of a sneak peek ahead of our full report coming out in early September. So with that, I will hand it off to Jaime and Brielle, and I will stop screen sharing so you all can share.
Thank you, Liz. I'm just going to pull up my screen. Share sound. Share.
Great. So thank you for that intro, Liz. I'm Jaime from the Public Policy Lab. We're going to run through a few things today. First, I'll tell you a little bit about PPL, or the Public Policy Lab. Then Brielle will chat about Digital Doorways, the project we worked on with Beck. We're going to give you a sneak peek of the video, and then we'll have some time to answer any questions. So if questions come up as we are going through this, feel free to drop them in the chat, or you can save them somewhere so that you don't forget them by the time we get there. So we are Public Policy Lab. We believe we were the first nonprofit established in the US to do human-centered policy design, specifically with and for Americans. So we partner with government and NGOs to improve service delivery systems and the policies that enable those systems. And we generally focus on the experiences of low-income and often marginalized communities. The approach we take to innovating in policy is a service designer's approach. So our work is human-centered, it's collaborative, we create visual materials that we then iterate on, and we also create a time-based understanding of a service and the many channels through which we interact with it. So for example, with Snap, we're not just going to look at the application process for Snap, we're going to try and look at the many touch points somebody might have throughout their experience with that program. And there are 2 other things that animate us. The first is thinking about the future. So all of our work, of course, looks at what's happening today, but we're often looking at 5, 10, 15 years out down the line as well. And we are always interested in how what we do, especially given that we're often using public money, can be made publicly available for folks who want to learn and use that work as well. So we're headquartered in Brooklyn, which is where we are right now, but we've partnered with dozens of agencies, philanthropies, institutions across the country, and we've conducted research with residents in more than half of the states. And we have a lot of case studies on our website. And so we try and publish as much as we can, and you can find really detailed descriptions of many of our projects there. We bring our approach to a wide variety of subject matter areas and service delivery systems. We've done a lot of work around children and families, as well as education, primarily in public schools, thinking about them as service delivery sites, as opposed to looking at pedagogy. And we do work in health and accessibility as well, in both in terms of physical and mental health. We've done work around housing access and affordability. We also recently redesigned a lot of the Section 8 materials in New York City, and that work is currently being transitioned to HUD. And as you can see here, we've spent some time working inside of jails. We've also done work around the reentry experience and upstream work looking at the factors that contribute to people ultimately committing acts of violence. Finally, with veterans, we've done a lot of work for the VA, including helping to set up the Veterans Experience Office at the VA, which was the first of its kind. So in all of these projects, we're really doing two things. The first is looking at and trying to improve how a service is delivered, and also how to design the policies that enable and inform that service. In order to do those things, we're often doing a lot of other things, which includes creating hard copies of materials, but also creating digital products, including tools and interfaces for benefits access specifically. To support change management, which is really ultimately what pretty much all of our projects come down to, we're doing research and evaluation with members of the public, as well as people that are delivering those services. And always we're trying to engage with the community. And the photo we have here is kind of like the worst kind of community engagement, where everyone's sitting in a hotel lobby. But we really prefer and actively try to go into the community and meet people where they are more likely to be, and engage in more ethnographic research, which is a much better example of that is going to be more like what you're going to hear about from Brielle.
Okay, thanks for that, Jaime. Hopefully that sets the stage a little bit for how we work at Public Policy Lab, and also introduces a little bit more about how we got to work with the Beck Center and the Digital Benefits Network for this project, the Digital Doorways to Public Benefits. So like Liz sort of introed, as well as Jaime, the goal of this work was to speak directly with people who engage with these digital identity systems while they're accessing public benefits, and hear about those firsthand experiences. So we focused on 4 areas of inquiry or themes by which we kind of approached these conversations and created our interview questions. The first being access. What challenges are people facing as they're trying to access these benefits? The second is consent and optionality. How are beneficiaries experiencing choice and control, and transparency in these digital identity systems? What kind of support systems are available to people as they're navigating these systems? And how do digital identity systems affect people's trust and perception about government and about these public benefits programs? So to kind of get into the weeds of those inquiry areas, we spoke with 33 folks, 29 beneficiaries, as well as 4 subject matter experts. And we went to Massachusetts, we went to Boston, we went to Phoenix and Tucson, Arizona, as well as Yonkers, New York. We screened for people who were using Medicaid, SNAP, or unemployment insurance, though as you all know, many times people were using multiple benefits as well as benefits outside of these 3. And we focused on semi-structured interviews and using multimedia or recording these interviews as much as possible with people's consent, so that we can bring their voices to you and so that we're not speaking for them. So we have 4 key insights, or like the highlights of our insights that we're going to share today, though to see the full list of insights, you'll have to read the report in a couple months. So the first highlight is around privacy and security challenges, and how beneficiaries like prioritize their privacy over security and access. And access and authentication issues, specifically around multi-factor authentication and security questions. We have insights around user experience and support, particularly around how human support remains a really crucial element to these systems. And finally, around tech access and literacy barriers, specifically around biometric verification and how there can be usability issues and doubt around that. But as we've mentioned, we like to really prioritize and uplift the voices of the folks who are using these services. And so we're really excited to share with you a video reel.
Thank you both so much. For the sake of time, we do need to continue moving forward. But I ask that you continue to ask these questions in the chat. Brielle and Jamie are going to be on for a little bit longer. And this isn't the only time you're going to get to hear about this. So we are planning on publishing this work in early September. And we're also going to have several webinars and opportunities for you to engage with the researchers. But really, honestly, just want to thank Jamie and Brielle, not just for coming today, but for their leadership in this work that we did in the field. There's a lot of considerations that like we've brought up that like make it challenging to do this type of work. And they've been very thoughtful, like partners in just helping us think through like what does it look like to recruit? What does it look like to ask specific questions? And they're also just like very good listeners when it comes to like hearing people share their stories and their interactions with technology. So if you ever do want to learn more about their work, we encourage you to look up Public Policy Lab, and we can drop that link in the chat. Um, but now I do need to move forward, but it's on to something really exciting. So, next up we have Aidan Barrett. So Aidan Barrett is a digital communication specialist for Colorado Peak. He works directly with members who use Peak to apply for and manage their benefits, as well as other state teams like Colorado Medicaid, SNAP, and more. So before working in state government, Aidan was a marketing director and communications lead in higher education. But today, Aidan will be sharing how he and his team are using the Peak platform to understand and improve user experiences during the application and login process. Take it away, Aidan.
Thank you, Quinny, and thank you all for having me here. So, like Quinny said, my name is Aidan Barrett, and a little bit about what I do. Actually said I'm the digital communication specialist for Colorado Peak. So my day-to-day usually involves things like coordinating plain language reviews of current questions and information that already exist on our website. This includes reviewing things for plain language with groups that include assisters, program representatives from like SNAP, Medicaid, different programs like that that we offer on Peak, and then other plain language writers at the state of Colorado as well. I also, me and my team communicate directly with our members on Peak using things like banners. We sometimes write helpful tips if there's a confusing question or a function that people have a hard time with. And then we also recently started adding things to a page called the New and Improved Features page on Peak to let users know when we have a brand new functionality. So like I said, we often work with stakeholders, both internal and external. This can include like the programs themselves that offer these benefits, as well as counties, sister organizations and community-based organizations, and not enough, but sometimes with our users themselves. Two other things I think are going to be most important that we do day to day that I'm going to actually spend most of my time today presenting on are me and my team often try to find ways to improve Peak using direct user feedback, and then using that feedback to actually onboard projects with our developers that include design sessions so that we can actually go ahead and make those improvements themselves. And probably should have done this to start, but what is Peak? So Peak stands for the Program Eligibility and Application Kit. It is the state of Colorado's only online tool to apply for and manage and learn about 11 different programs, both state and federal, including CCAP, Medicaid, SNAP, TANF, and WIC. So users can do a lot of different things, and we're always trying to find different ways to make users' lives easier in the online space. But I have listed a couple of things here. I think some of the most important things are users can access and download their medical ID cards. They can make payments on a benefit if they need to. They can both submit documents and see any documents that are due in order to make a determination on their benefits. They can renew their benefits. They can update just their general information. They can also, this is an important one, view any letters related to their case. So I think it's also really important, especially after that last presentation from Public Policy Lab, to note that we try whenever we can to make features available to peak users without them actually having to create an account. So we call these people guest users. They do not have to actually create an account to do certain things, like specifically, and we just implemented some of these things. They can apply for benefits. They cannot renew benefits, but they can now submit documents and see any documents are due in order to get a determination on their submissions. So we're trying to find and work with program areas to add additional guest features, because we know it's best practice. And obviously people sometimes have a hard time actually setting up and creating an account, even if we have some awesome features available to account holders. All right, and I'm going to try to move a little bit quickly, but I think what's going to be most pertinent to this group is something else that we started doing back in December, which is we used to have a post-application survey on Peak. It was very simple. When somebody would put in an application, we just asked them how their experience was. Not very great, but that was our initial feedback tool. But starting in December, we have one that is much, much, much more in-depth. It utilizes a company called Qualtrics, if you have heard of it before. And I'm going to go ahead and show what that looks like. Can everybody, quick thumbs up, let me know if you can see Peak right now. I just switched tabs. All right, awesome. Thank y'all. So this is what Peak looks like. This is our home page. So you'll see here on the right side of the page, every single page of Peak now has this give feedback window. So users can use this to share feedback, or if for whatever reason they're unable to do something on the page itself, they can actually find information about how to contact support right here. Now I'm realizing I'm going to need to refresh my page to go back and actually show how to leave feedback, but I want to show that too. So if I'm instead trying to share feedback, we take users through a short flow, try to get them to choose like what their experience was, what they were trying to do and were unable to do. And then we also give them an other, in which case they can give a free form comment. Now, this was a pain, full disclosure, and trying to get implemented on Peak. One of the main reasons is because, you know, all of this information is being sent over to, and stored by like a third-party platform. So the number one issue that we ran into is we cannot store public health information or any PII. So we actually go through manually on a week-to-week basis to go through. Obviously, we tell people right here, please do not include any personal identifiable information or PHI, but we do go through and try to remove any of that information if people do it, because they unfortunately still do that sometimes. So we go through and manually remove it, but then every month, our team actually meets to go through all of the feedback that we received during the previous month. So I can give you an example. In June, we received around 1,400 submissions, and that doesn't even include the ones on this page that you're seeing today. We also send post-application surveys using Qualtrics that look very similar to this, but come in the form of an email. We only send it to users who've opted in to text and emails. And then we also submit, or we'll send over a feedback for users who've started something, but haven't actually submitted it. Our thought there is maybe they ran into an issue. So we want to see if there's anything that they can tell us about their experience that maybe led to why they were unable to accomplish what they were able to accomplish. So those post and in progress feedback surveys, we've received about 1,400 over the past month. So there's quite a bit more that we receive. We call it kind of like our ongoing surveys. But so like I said, we meet on a monthly basis to go through some of that feedback. So I wanted to share some of that here today. I have 3 examples here, and I want to point out that this first user right here is pointing out, unfortunately, I think they accurately are telling us about how confusing it is that we ask certain questions for certain age groups. We are sort of mandated at Peak to ask certain questions based on the programs people are applying for. So we have a single application, but that application might look different. It might show certain pages. It might show certain questions based on the programs users are applying for. So as I'm sure everybody on this call knows, certain programs ask certain things. I think one that we run into issues with a lot is that SNAP, based on federal policies, is not allowed to require users answer things beyond name, address, and signature before they can make a submission. So on Peak, for example, if users were applying for both SNAP and Medicaid, we ran into an issue for a while where users have to be able to make that submission, even with those three pieces of information, while Medicaid requires way more information about applicants. So we've onboarded a project to kind of address that issue, but there's still problems with this. So I'm bringing that one up because I'll talk about the rest before I talk about some ways that we're addressing it. This next feedback is referring to, I think, another issue we've seen from users telling us, hey, just because we have the opportunity to add things on Peak in the application, I think users are thinking that they have to do that, where what we would prefer is really quick. I should have explained this from the get-go, but the way that Colorado works, Peak sends information to and receives information from a database where eligibility is determined by actual counties. We're a county administered state, so all the eligibility determinations have to take place at the county level. So like I said, Peak sort of sends and receives information from that database. But anyways, the way that Peak is supposed to work is a user will submit an application. Then once the county starts working that application, if they determine, hey, we need proof of income or citizenship, for example, they will mark that in their database. And then the Peak user will receive a to-do card on their dashboard that tells them, hey, in order to get benefits, you need to do X and X. They can actually upload whatever the proof is right then and there. So I'm pointing this feedback out because I think it's confusing to users. They think that, oh man, because I have the option to submit income information, proof of identity, I have to do that up front. And that's sort of front loading the burden for users. And we do not want to do that, especially because not all programs will require those proofs, whatever they may be. And then this last quote is, again, I think, commenting about how confusing the application be and how long it can take. And that's because we have a bunch of different questions, even if they may not apply to all of the programs they have on their application. So I wanted to point these things out because we have two projects that are coming later this year in September, and then one that's coming in December. The first project is our plan is to remove questions based on a user's age. So if I'm applying on behalf of my child, they should not have to see questions. They're not required to answer these questions, but they shouldn't even see questions about incarceration, for example. They shouldn't see questions about, is my toddler working? Well, no. So why are we giving you the opportunity? Even if it's not required, users sometimes think that, well, my kid doesn't do this. Why are you asking me this? So we have one project to try to remove certain questions or rephrase questions based on a user's age or an applicant's age. The second thing in September is we're not allowed to require things up front, but users can submit things up front. So we're trying to let users know in the early stages of the application process what types of things might be required of them later on. And we want to, right now, we just show every single piece of proof that they could ever be asked for. Instead, we want that to be a dynamic message, so it would be very much dependent on the programs they're applying for. So hopefully that leads users to not, again, go through the burden of uploading every single type of proof because it might not affect their eligibility for the programs they're applying for. The last thing I wanted to talk about is in this research with our users, we've discovered another thing we've tried to find out is where users drop off on our platform. Where do they leave the website? And one of the top pages is our citizenship and lawful presence page. Have a feeling that it does have to do with, depending on the program, we do require social security numbers. And if they do not have a social security number, if they're a non-citizen, they have to specify that for some programs like Medicaid, for example. And then if they are a non-citizen, they have to say their non-citizenship status. So we're, again, kind of relegated in what we are allowed to ask and how we're allowed to ask it, even though a big part of my job is trying to plain language some of these policy related questions. But I bring that one up because we have another project, this is the one that's coming in December, that seeks to improve a couple of pop-ups and questions on our citizenship page. So to do exactly what I was asking a question about, Brielle and Jaime, which was, where's the fine line between explaining users why we're asking this question, but also giving them the space to do it, right? So I think when it comes to citizenship questions, especially with some changes coming to Medicaid, we're going to try to do a better job of explaining why we have to ask those questions, even if the federal government probably already knows your social security number, for example. So that's a goal that we're trying to accomplish in a December project. And then very quickly, I wanted to show off, this is one of the projects I was talking about before. So before users actually start applying, they can see this page that gives them the types of proof. Again, it will list every single, you can only see 3 on the screenshot, but it will show them every single type of proof that might be asked of them. Instead of showing all of them, we want to make it so that it will only show them the ones that might be asked depending on the programs they apply for. Because some programs will never require things like, bank statements. They may never ask for a bank statement. So users shouldn't see this and think, oh man, I need to submit my bank statement up front, because we do not want users to have to go through that hassle. And that was a whole lot, but I was trying to go quick. Oop, did not mean to do that. Any questions that anybody has for me about all of that? I saw that there was a lot of things coming via chat, so maybe there were and I just missed them, but I'll try to open this up now. Also, feel free to come off mute and ask as well.
You have 2 questions, Jorge. Would you like to ask?
Hey, Aidan, how are you? This is a great presentation. Thank you. One question, do you have a breakdown of the usage of or access from your Colorado residents on whether is a majority using the desktop experience or on mobile?
Great question. And you know what? I meant to mention this at the beginning of the presentation. Yes, we do. And we have found, so jumping back in August of 2023, we finally finished making every aspect of Peak fully mobile friendly. Since then, we've seen our mobile usage jump up to right at 70%, where it used to be hovering around 40 to 50. So yes, most users access Peak from a smartphone or a tablet, which to answer an unasked question means that a big part of our focus is what is this design going to look like on mobile, and how do we sort of focus on that experience for users? That does include our future plans. I probably shouldn't be talking about this, but our future plans to develop a mobile app so that we can also institute some things that are more specific to mobile apps like biometric sign-in and stuff like that. Katie?
Hi, this was a really great presentation. Thank you so much. I was really excited to see that WIC is included in Peak, because in most states, WIC is not included in multi-benefit applications and online systems. But I was really interested to hear it. So like toward the end, you were talking about, how many people drop off when they get to that citizenship page. And I was curious, I don't know if you would have any information about this, but it just came to mind for me because WIC is a little bit different from a lot of other benefit programs in that it doesn't require citizenship, and most WIC application processes don't ask for social security number. So there's the huge benefit of WIC being included in the multi-benefits application, but then they're maybe getting asked this citizenship question that they wouldn't be asked otherwise, and don't really need to be asked. So I was curious to hear do you have any sense of how that affects people applying for WIC specifically to get that question that they might not get otherwise, or don't need to answer for WIC?
Sure. Part of this is, thank you for asking. That's a great, I'm so glad you brought that up. So this is something that came to our attention recently. Members of Colorado WIC reached out and said, hey, we noticed that members are, it's not required, but they're shown the citizen or the social security number question. So this happened only like a month or so ago. We actually removed it if users are only applying for WIC. Now, that only accomplishes part of the problem, because what I was talking about as well, if a user is applying for SNAP, or sorry, not SNAP, for Medicaid, for example, too, which does require it, they'll see it as a required field. So I do think that we, like I said, coming in sometime in December, our goal is to try to make it a little bit more clear. Here's why you're asking or being asked this question and required to answer it. It's because of this particular program. If you wanted to, for example, only submit an application for WIC, you can do so without, having all of those same required fields. So we're trying to look at, that's a lot of information to kind of explain to people, especially when they're already halfway through an application. So we're looking at different ways we can do that, whether it be telling users up front that some required questions will be dependent on some some programs requirements, but then also trying to get into detail on the page itself. Hey, here's a social security number. It's required, but here's why. Yep.
Awesome. We have time for one more question. And Kate, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great presentation. Curious, I think I understand from our state that for changes to the paper application, at least for Medicaid and maybe for SNAP, that the state requires approval from CMS. And as I understand it in North Carolina, that's been a barrier for us to having the paper Medicaid application available in more languages. And I'm just wondering what flexibility your team has as you're experimenting and changing things with the online platform. Do you need approval or check-ins with USDA or CMS, or is it different than that paper process?
That is a great question. In full disclosure, issues like that are sometimes the bane of my existence because absolutely, we do have to go through the same approval process. I'll say that in a lot of ways, it can be an added burden for us, like having to kind of work through a program in order to message to our users. But we obviously have to follow the requirements. But I can tell you that there's some examples, the one that you just mentioned, where it's actually really beneficial for us because we get to rely on the the Colorado Healthcare Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing, HCPF for short, that administers Colorado Medicaid. They're the ones who do all of that work for us. So they come to us with a new question or a new guideline or update to the paper application. We kind of talk through like, okay, well, can we phrase it this way? This might be a little bit easier. Sometimes one of the reasons why we love having this Qualtrics platform is we can sometimes use direct user feedback to say, hey, you're updating this question. Here's where users have run into issues understanding this question in the past. And then when we kind of come to a determination there, they do have to go back to CMS and make sure that it fits the bill. So yes, we do have to go through those same processes, but our team is kind of lucky in that we get to rely on our state partners to kind of do that, be the mediator, so to speak, with federal government. Cool.
Thank you so much, Aidan. I know there's one question for you in the chat. If you can't answer that in the chat, that would be lovely. It's from Erica Siri. But in keeping with time, we are going to move on. Thank you so much to our presenters on today's call, Jaime, Brielle, Aidan. We appreciate the information that you shared. And honestly, I think it brought up a lot of discussion questions that we might want to noodle on in the future, or maybe in our next section of the call. Before we transition into our breakout groups, we do have a few minutes where we want to invite folks to share any announcements, resources, or new initiatives that they have going on. While I share ours, you're encouraged to share yours in the chat, and we'll follow those up, sharing them in Slack and over email. But if you do want to share raise your hand and unmute yourself to share something, feel free to do that. And we have time to call on one person. In the meantime, we can go to the next slide and I'll share some of what's happening at the DBN. So definitely want to encourage folks, if you're not on Slack already, to join. There's a lot of things that we've talked about here that I think could be really great in conversations that could be ongoing and asynchronous on Slack, and some of the resources that we've shared here too. So would love to encourage you to join the Slack channel. And then we do have an event that is for government agencies at the end of this month. So we're partnering with Nick Doty of the Center for Democracy and Technology to do a Q&A on mobile driver's license and digital IDs. So he's going to explain some of the basic technology, but really talk about like the implications for standards and like human rights. And so if you have any questions on like what yeah, like maybe any ethical concerns or like data security concern with mobile driver's license, this is a really great event to join. And also if you're curious to know how do they work. So this is going to be for folks that work for state, local, tribal, and territorial governments. And the next slide is is on September 15th, we're going to launch a webinar on digital doorways. So that's going to give you more insights into what was shared already today. And then October 16th is our next community of practice meeting. So that's it for the DBN. But so save these dates. But is there anybody on the call that wants to share any upcoming event or any research or resources or anything that they've been working on lately that somebody else might benefit from learning about? I see Kate has a question. Has anyone seen a good visual overview of the HR1 timeline when new requirements for SNAP and Medicaid will be implemented? I know lots of groups are working on translating these changes, wondering if anyone has any favorite summaries. Does anyone have an answer for Kate? You're welcome to unmute yourself, if so. And if somebody finds one after this call that they'd want to share, feel free to share that out, and we can disseminate it to the group. Okay, that was a really good one, Kate. Yeah. So thank y'all so much for being a part of that. Now we're going to transition into our discussion groups. And the way those are going to work is that you're going to meet for 25 minutes and then you're going to leave the call straight from your discussion group. So there's no need to come back to the main group. But we're going to let y'all have some time with folks in the community to talk a little bit more in depth on a few key topics. So we're going to have 3 breakout groups, and they're going to be facilitated by community of practice members. So in group 1, we're going to have emerging technologies. So you're going to get a chance to talk a little bit about AI, MDLs, etc. And that's going to be moderated by Erica Siri from Massachusetts. In group 2, you're going to get a chance to talk about identifying shared user privacy concerns. And that's going to be facilitated by Katie Roth Eisenberg, who is with us from Johns Hopkins. And lastly, we have preparing for application and platform changes in light of HR1 OBBA, and that will be facilitated by Kate Hansen. So in a few minutes, you're going to get to pick, in a few seconds, you're going to get to pick the breakout group that you want to go to. Each breakout group is going to have a representative from the Digital Benefits Network that's going to be in there to provide assistance and take notes. And then you'll be dismissed from that group. And each of the facilitators has the questions for today's call. But since I'm not going to get to see all of you towards the end, I want to thank you all so much for joining.